Imagine this. You're standing in the center of a storm. Not a storm of wind and rain, but of voices. Sharp, rising voices. Accusations flying like arrows. You're not outside the storm. You're inside it. You're part of it. Someone's challenging your beliefs. Someone's pressing every emotional button you didn't know you had. Your pulse quickens. Your mind races. You rehearse replies before they even finish their sentences. Someone's challenging your beliefs. Someone's pressing every emotional button you didn't know you had. Your pulse quickens. Your mind races. You rehearse replies before they even finish their sentences. You're not just speaking. You're defending. You're fighting. And somewhere deep inside, you tell yourself, if I can just land the perfect comeback, I'll win. But then a quiet figure enters. They don't interrupt. They don't pick a side. They lean close and say just one thing. Low, calm, unsettling. You've already lost. You freeze. What do they mean? You haven't even made your strongest point. You haven't backed down. How could that possibly mean defeat? But then you begin to understand. You've lost, not because you're wrong. You've lost because you've been pulled into the fight. You're no longer choosing your words. You're reacting. And in that moment, your power doesn't belong to you anymore. You've surrendered it. This is what the German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer might call the illusion of control through conflict. It's what Nietzsche hinted at with his idea of overcoming, and it's what modern psychology confirms. Most arguments are not about truth. They're about ego. And the moment you argue for ego, you lose. Let's step into this idea fully. Let's unpack the silent art of influence, the unseen strength that doesn't scream to be heard, but shapes conversations, decisions, even destinies without ever raising its voice. Why? Because real power is quiet. Most people believe power is loud, that it shows up in dominance and volume, in winning debates and forcing others to submit. But history, philosophy, and psychology tell us something very different. They tell us that silence, not noise, is the sharpest blade. Why do we argue in the first place? Think about the last time you were in a heated debate. Think about how it started. Was it really about discovering truth? Or was it something else, something deeper? Psychologists have long studied what drives us to argue, and it turns out that most arguments don't emerge from logic. They come from fear. Fear of being wrong. Fear of being humiliated. Fear of being seen as less intelligent, less competent, less in control. These aren't intellectual fears. They're existential. When someone questions your beliefs, it doesn't feel like a challenge to your ideas. It feels like a challenge to your identity. So, what do? We fight. Not with fists, but with facts, tone, sarcasm, volume. We armor ourselves with words and launch them like missiles, not to understand, but to win. The trouble is, while you're busy preparing your counterattack, so is the other person, and nobody's actually listening. You're both just waiting to speak. This isn't communication, it's combat. But now consider this. What if the real measure of strength wasn't in how well you argue, but in how little you need to? Enter the philosophy of restraint. Lao Tzu, the ancient Taoist sage, once wrote, "He who conquers others is strong. He who conquers himself is mighty." This is where things shift. Because the one who remains calm in conflict, the one who listens without reacting, the one who speaks sparingly but decisively, they don't just win the argument, they own the room. Let's bring this closer to life. Imagine a high-stakes business meeting. Two department heads are clashing. One is loud, gesturing, trying to control the room. The other sits still, unmoved, listening. When they finally speak, they do so slowly, clearly. No wasted words. And suddenly, the entire tone of the room changes. Not because they spoke louder, but because they didn't waste their voice trying to dominate. They chose their moment, and when it came, they didn't speak to prove a point. They spoke to change the direction of the conversation. That is power. And it's not unique to business. You see it in war, in spirituality, in personal relationships, in the lives of those who understand that silence is not absence, it's presence, it's control. Let's look at three figures, real people, who lived this principle. First, Marcus Aurelius. Emperor of Rome, Stoic philosopher, arguably one of the most powerful men in human history, and yet in his private writings, meditations, we find no boasting, no gloating, no aggressive rhetoric. Instead, we find restraint, reflection, self-discipline. Marcus ruled not with noise, but with gravity. He understood that to be swayed by anger or ego was to be enslaved by it. So he trained himself daily, not to react, but to respond, not to defend, but to lead. Second, Maya Angelou, a poet, a thinker, a woman whose life was marked by trauma, injustice, and struggle. But when she spoke, whether in interviews or on stage, there was no bitterness, no rage, just an incredible clarity and calm that carried more force than shouting ever could. She once said, "I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." And what people felt when she spoke was power. Third, Miyamoto Musashi, a samurai, a strategist, a man who won over 60 duels, often against opponents faster, stronger, and younger. But Musashi didn't rely solely on skill. He relied on psychology. He would delay fights, arrive late, say nothing, let his opponent's frustration build. And by the time the duel began, they were already off balance, emotionally compromised. He didn't just win with the sword, he won with silence. Why? Because silence creates space, and in that space, people reveal themselves. When you don't respond to provocation, the other person has to keep talking. They fill the silence, and in doing so, they expose their intentions, their fears, their desperation. This is why silence isn't passive. It's active, strategic, measured. It says, "I am not here to prove anything to you. I am here to observe, and when I speak, it will matter." There's a concept in military strategy known as initiative, the one who controls the tempo of the battle, who decides when and where things unfold, holds the upper hand. In conversation, the same rule applies. Control the rhythm. Don't let others pull you into their chaos. Make them wait for you. Make them adapt to you. This is the way of the strategist. But let's not mistake this for avoidance. Silence is not always the answer. There are moments when the world demands a voice, when injustice, deception, or cruelty rise. And silence in those moments becomes complicity. So the question is not, should I speak? It's why am I speaking? Am I defending my ego? Or am I defending a principle? Am I reacting to emotion? Or am I shaping reality? This is where Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch comes in. Not as some cold, stoic archetype, but as a human being who has mastered his instincts. One who decides when to speak, when to fight, and when to walk away. Not based on emotion, but on purpose. To be that person, to be the master of your voice, you have to unlearn something the world has taught you, that loud equals strong. It doesn't. Anyone can shout. Anyone can argue, but not everyone can wait. Not everyone can observe without reacting. Not everyone can choose to speak with clarity when the world demands noise. That is what separates the average from the influential, the reactive from the intentional, the crowd from the leader. Now let's ground this in real life, your life. The next time you're in a debate, pause. The next time someone insults you, pause. The next time you feel the urge to prove them wrong, pause. In that pause, you reclaim your power. You are not your impulses. You are not your defensiveness. You are not your ego. You are something much more precise, much more focused. When you choose your words instead of unleashing them, people notice. When you wait before responding, people lean in. When you speak only when it matters, your words carry weight. And here's something even more powerful. When you don't speak, when you allow silence to fill the space, people start to question themselves. Did I say something wrong? Why aren't they responding? What do they know that I don't? This is the paradox of power. The less you need to prove yourself, the more others believe in you. And it's not manipulation. It's alignment. Alignment with the truth that influence is not about dominating others. It's about mastering yourself. Because the loudest person in the room is rarely the strongest. The one who feels the need to be right is often the most insecure. And the person who has the discipline to say nothing often holds the final word. So what does this mean for you? It means you don't have to win every argument. You don't have to correct every false claim. You, you don't have to engage every critic, every troll, every provocation, because real strength is restraint. Not because you're afraid to fight, but because you don't need to. Because you're not here to play their game. You're here to create your own. Let others waste their breath. You speak like every word is an investment, like your voice is a rare currency, and your silence, your pause, your decision to not react is your signature move. So the next time someone challenges you, mocks you, misrepresents you, stop. Ask, do I want to be right or do I want to be effective? Do I want to win this moment or do I want to master the long game? Because anyone can win a moment, but it takes something more to win yourself. And when you master that, you don't just influence conversations, you influence lives. If this spoke to you, if something in you resonates with the idea of quiet power, then hold it close. Not just as knowledge, but as practice. Train your pause, master your restraint, use your silence as strategy. Because in a world addicted to noise, your silence will echo the loudest. Want more ideas that sharpen your thinking, challenge your emotions, and give you tools for real power? Subscribe, hit the bell, and join us for more philosophy, psychology, and practical wisdom. Because the greatest changes start not with a scream, but with a whisper. And that whisper can be yours.